So I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Go ahead.
So moved. Unanimous.
Unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board, John Betts here, owner of Shippies, along with Lisa Zaloga, my architect. And
one of those microphones for me.
There's also a podium, Mr. Betts.
let's
Might be a
do
little
the
more
podium. Feel like I'm back in corporate. Well, thanks. No, we had a great session last time, and I just wanted to follow up with you and let you know some changes we made based on our strategy. And actually, the comment as I relooked at the meeting from the last time, the great challenge we had, something along the lines of, I hope that roller cover is ready by Oktoberfest. And I said, my God, what a great challenge. So anyway, let me just talk to you a little bit about this. So last time we shared the whole vision with you, the whole game plan that we had, essentially doubling the size of the restaurant and really focusing on operations, the ease of the experience for the employees, and ultimately a better experience for our guests. But since then, we've divided things into two pieces, and I'll refer to Shippy's 2.0 as what we're going to speak to today. And 2.0 really is what I would consider, although it's bigger in one way, it's about the expansion of the building. It's about moving the restrooms. It's about adding some kitchen prep area, and it's about adding more storage. All those things, as you would know, really have a lot less to do with any challenges with septic and some of those nuances that are much more complicated, along with parking. And so that's what we really want to talk about and give you an update on that, along with talking about the feedback we got over the weekend and tell you where we are in that. And so our objective, and we believe this is feasible, is assuming that we get some good guidance from you guys and meet with the ZBA and the ARB, that we may be able to accomplish my number one mission, and that is to move those bathrooms before July. And the thinking is, if we can move the bathrooms, the rest of the project can just take place throughout the summer, not bothering our guests or employees, and we have a whole plan around that. But it really comes down to, I looked at the notes and I watched the video, we spent about 90% of the conversation about the dynamics around the front part, which is the more exciting and cool part, but that's also the part where we have a lot more work to do. And we've already had our submission to the Suffolk County Board of Health received, and we're in dialogue with them currently. But that's October, November, that's later in the year. And so with that, I really want to just thank you for the feedback we had the last time, and turn things over to Lisa so we can get this thing going along. Thanks.
Lisa Zaloga, I'm the architect. I hate the microphone. We just got our pages of response from Nelson Pope and Voorhees. So we spent a little bit of time trying to gather the information that you guys requested, and I assume that you don't want me to submit it all to you now, and obviously I don't have it all. Some of it I require some things from Squires and Holden, some test holes, get some easement information from the lawyers and stuff. So I'm working on all that. I guess I wrote a letter that basically explains what our goal is going to be in responding to that, and I can send that to you guys and Kathy, or I can hand it up to you now, whichever you prefer. I went to Steve in the village to talk to him about the village property that's behind Shippies. One of our challenges is to figure out what's underneath all of that, and nobody really seems to know. But Steve did write a letter, and I can submit that to you as well, that just says that as far as they know, there's no culverts, there's no underground drainage structures under that area in the back there. It doesn't really become important, I don't think, until stage 3 or phase 3, where we have an entire plan to upgrade the occupancy of the restaurant and put in an amazing amount of septic system that has to be put in to bring us up to current standards. So the current plan is really, it doesn't have anything to do with the back property area. We're just trying to expand within our property and not expand our occupancy. So I guess my question to Kathy and to you guys is really about some of the things that were listed on the application review have to do with the parking lot, the septic, the parking requirements, all those things. Does that really come into play as much in what we're trying to do, where we're just expanding the use of the restaurant and not the occupancy? Or is that kind of also part of phase 3? Because like we will be coming back to you for phase 3, and we will be coming back to you for the drainage structures and the septic system and all those things that we have to put in when we want to do this roller cover and actually expand our occupancy. So that's kind of, I wanted a little bit of clarity from you guys in terms of that.
Sure. So yeah, whenever you make any site improvements that are building expansions, you need to have a site plan approval that shows the entire site. So it would be existing versus proposed. It kind of kicks in the parking requirements, the drainage requirements, the landscaping requirements.
But on the neighboring properties as well?
No, on the Shippey's own properties. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the things said on the adjacent property as well. So that was why I was
So that's existing conditions, just so that way you can identify, buildings within 200 feet. Some of those things can be waived if the board is comfortable with it, not showing, the outlines of the buildings next door. That's the type of thing you're asking?
Well, it was about the culverts and the drainage and the easements on the other properties, particularly the village property, which is really
The right of way is owned by the village? Okay. So that was represented as being owned under
Oh,
the
no,
same...
I'm sorry. I thought you meant the access to the parking lot. That little right of way in the back, that's actually owned by us, and I will get you
Right.
the easement information on that.
That's an interesting way to put it, because when you hear right of way, you usually think that that's a municipally owned property.
Yeah.
So no, that needs to be part of the entire plan. So, and you're welcome to call me.
Okay.
if you
Yeah,
have
no,
questions.
we're talking, I think, about two different things. You're talking about that little stretch that's called out as the right of way in the back.
Right.
I'm talking about the access to the back parking lot that's owned by the village. I thought you wanted information on that, I guess is what I was trying to find out.
Only as it relates to whatever happens on the site. So if
Okay.
the property is accessed via another property, then yeah,
Okay.
that we would need to see how that works and if that's going to change.
Okay.
So
Can I add something to that?
Sure, go ahead.
That whole area along there, Shippey's, Rotations, and 75 Windmill Lane, and what's behind there is a lot of work is being proposed back there. So any ideas that you would have to address that entire area back there for the future, I would recommend adding that. And, let's try and work together to get, since there's so much going on, and there are at least 2 applications in front of the planning board, yours and 75 Windmill, to try and take a consolidated view of everybody working together to make that whole back lot area work for all the businesses along Windmill Lane there.
Okay. Yeah, I can look at their application.
Yeah.
And I can add that whole area is historically filled in swamp. And there are serious modern time issues with what do you do with the swamp's covered. It's called Windmill Lane. They used to row boats across it. It's all filled in. There are joint problems for everybody along that way, all the way up past, well past the supermarket. They have the bioswale, which is, Kathy's guy her agronomist is not up to skill. Nothing's growing. We got to fix that. But that whole thing, your solution probably rests with the county for a solution for everybody. So I don't want you to do more work, but you're going to have to, because the people are really worried about all the water that goes into the filled in, now much narrower ahead of Lake Agawam.
Okay.
I can say the one thing we have done is working with Rick next door. So he's
Good fellow.
So absolutely. we've incorporated his trash into our space.
John, you need to step up.
What I can tell you, that, at least with our neighbor next door, his trash is on another location, and we brought that into ours so we can clean up that part of things. So we haven't looked at the water aspect of this, but we are trying to do the right thing with Rick and clean that up a little bit. But I understand you're talking about something much more, sounds like much more extensive.
It's water on the exit. You've got to deal with the flush.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I hear you.
I think I agree with Alan. It's complicated back there because it is a filled-in swamp, and it is a potentially environmental sensitive area. But we appreciate you approaching it on an integrated, neighborly basis, because that's certainly the way we're going to consider all the applications along that side of Windmill going forward. We think of that as
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Okay, so I will answer all of his questions and submit them back, and hopefully we can come back to your next meeting and have a conversation. Do you think that you guys are lead agency, right?
Yes.
So do you do a secret determination?
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to that yet. So,
Okay. No, I just want,
yeah.
because that's one of the things the health department is asking me about for the next phase is, the
Yes.
secret determination. So.
Yeah, I believe this falls under an unlisted action, but I have to check on that.
Okay.
Whether we have to do a coordinated review, but they'll always use the village's secret determinations.
Okay. And then do you think that this will require a public hearing?
All
John.
site plans require public hearing,
It does.
so
They can't be waived.
I can look into if that's something that we can
It's-
vary, but I'm of the opinion that all site plans
It's not
require.
required, and actually, it's like if the planning board deems it's necessary, but I can't think of one that has been waived that, since 2006.
And the reason you ask is
That's right.
It's all
Yeah.
about timing. It's all about timing.
Yeah, so yeah, I think you probably have to factor in public hearing in your timetable.
Okay.
So whatever you can do to put together a site plan that is more comprehensive, that actually tells the story, what is existing, what's proposed, the better. And then, that's when we can start talking about a public hearing.
Okay.
So, and then there's definitely noticing requirements, as you know.
I know.
So that adds the 21 days, I believe, is the minimum. So.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
believe the board has usually only waived those for internal only projects,
That's
at least recently.
Yeah. Okay. It's worth a
Okay.
shot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So next we're going to go to Fowler Farm, which is RRFACF. This is a working session, so the board can discuss the application. We won't take any comments from the public, although the board does reserve the right, since Rick Fowler and John Bennett are here, we may ask questions. We can always ask questions, but please, no comments unless you're recognized by the chair. This application for sketch plan approval has been evolving. We've made a lot of progress. We appreciate the patience and flexibility of the applicant. Before we begin the board discussion, since this has been evolving and moving around, I'd like to summarize where I believe we are, just for the board members, and we'll open it up to board discussion. We have the map, which is a January 11th map, I believe is the most recent map, which is out on the table there. And what we have there are 7 residential lots accessed by a cul-de-sac roadway. There's a wetland buffer along Phillips Pond that's required by the village code. And we'd also, at some point, will need to see a plan for wetlands revegetation pursuant to village code, but that's at the appropriate time, There's an agricultural reserve of 25% of the acreage on the northeast corner of the property. There's a landscape conservation easement that we've talked about that will provide a visual buffer along Wickapog Road, and the landscaping, or how that would be landscaped, is to be determined as we move through the process here. We are looking at a closure of the westernmost driveway due to the safety concerns regarding a truck entrance along a 90-degree curve on Wickapog Road. We are looking for a clear means of access for municipal authority to access the pond for cleaning and environmental monitoring. An agreement needs to be reached to provide open vistas in the agricultural area of the property from Fowler Street. So I think what we've discussed is that view on the east side of Fowler Street, well, removing the privet so that you have the same view on the west side. Yeah. Most importantly, we've got a lot of work to do on the nuts and bolts of the agricultural reserve and how that's drafted and the specifics governing the agricultural reserve. Some of the things that have been brought up that I think the board is looking for in the past, I think you all offered the changes can be only made by a majority vote of the Board of Trustees and a village majority plus one vote of the trustees and a village referendum. There would be limitations on what can be grown there, limitations on additional buildings, no animal husbandry, no equestrian usage, and upon cessation of farming in the reserve, an agreement that the area be maintained in a state acceptable to the neighboring uses. And that's kind of the general outline of where we are. And I just want to make sure that that's where the discussion starts, and then I'll open it up to anyone's comments.
That's where you're leaving it now? You're done with that?
I'm
Okay.
done. You can
Yes,
ask
I think this
questions.
is a really great opportunity at the sketch plan stage to discuss in more detail the things that we'd like to see so that so that they make it onto the next sketch plan and we can move ahead. Two things I'll just mention that Mark, that I feel a little differently than Mark mentioned. First, Mr. Bennett suggested language in the CNRs regarding changing the usage from agriculture at some point to require the trustees plus one plus a referendum by the village. And it's my strong belief that this type of decision is in the legal realm. And if you take it to the trustees and referendum, that's putting it in the political realm. And historically, these sort of decisions are made by planning boards who are tasked with education and knowledge and to make these decisions. And the village comprehensive plan specifically put that into our laps. So I don't agree that the decision should be taken out of the judicial realm, if you will, because at this point, a judge would have to decide, and it would have to be litigation and move on, versus Mr. Bennett's suggestion of the trustees and referendum, which at first blush does sound like more people and perhaps better, but it is a political decision versus a legal one. And I think that the planning board decisions should never be opened up to that, and provides a loophole to change the ag reserve. And the ag reserve is so important to this grant of a subdivision because the Fowler family has been such wonderful stewards of this special property, historic agricultural property, and so many villagers want to see this land remain in your family for generations to come, farmed, but if not farmed, then open for the community to experience what the land used to be. And here was the land that was farmed for so many years. So we do not want that to change, and that in perpetuity covenant that will run with the land is something we're working hard to draft that will be acceptable to both of us. The second thing that Mark mentioned that I disagree with is you mentioned something that if you were to cease farming, it would be maintained in a state that's okay to other, did you say homeowners or what?
Acceptable to neighboring uses.
Acceptable to neighboring. That again is we're already discussing how to change the land, when farming ceases, and the whole subdivision discussion is really based on this agricultural land remaining so, and if not remaining so, then to be open and not to be used, but to be passive and to be natural. So any decision to change it to a state that would be okay relative to the surrounding areas is something that I think this board needs to discuss more and needs to be very firmly decided upon before the CNRs can move forward with that drafting. Those are the two that stand out. I would simply add as well that when we discuss Fowler Street and removing the fence and providing a view shed and into the property. That too is because people want to see this property. And I think that's a very important point. And, you know, Article 10, Section 97-33, preservation of natural environment, many different sections, Section E2B, design standards. We want to reserve this site in a way that will in perpetuity stay green and be visible to those walking by, to school kids who want to stand there on Fowler and look through and see what you're farming and see the land. So I just want to make those 2 points at this time.
So if I could also, just for the board's reminder edification, so we're at the sketch plan stage under 97.7. The purpose of the exercise here is to reach a general agreement as to the form and layout of the subdivision. It's highly unusual, if it's ever happened at all, to have fully negotiated documents at the sketch plan stage. So what we can do, and what this board is well within its rights to do, is to approve a sketch plan with conditions. And the resolution would read, approved subject to conditions A, B, C, D, and so on and so forth. And we can put in those conditions that an agreement shall be reached between the applicant and the board as to acceptable agricultural uses on the reserve area. An agreement shall be reached between the applicant and the board as to expansion and or non-expansion of any existing buildings. So that's kind of the purpose of the exercise here. We're looking at the overall high-level concept and what we can put in conditions.
May I add to that? Something else that I think you need to know now, at least from, in my view, is that the easement that Mr. Bennett provided to us, the drainage easement from 1969, some of us believe that that is not satisfactory at this time to prove to us that we have the ability to test and to clean given today's standards. We haven't had any environmental experts in to just tell us whether that drainage easement is sufficiently wide, sufficiently strong to do the testing and the cleaning that might be required. So we would look to you to perhaps show us that it is in some way, maybe by having some experts test it, or come up with a separate or a different easement for us to review. Because I think that with Agawam and the environmental concerns, I'm sorry, am I interrupting you? I just wanted to tell you. Okay. Well, I can wait. Go ahead. No, but
Please.
so that's
Okay.
well, the sketch plan meeting is a time to be very specific, I believe, so that you know what we're looking for, so that we can get these things done and move forward to a very exciting time for you. So that easement is troubling. We just don't have enough expertise to evaluate it, given the likelihood of an environmental cleanup in 2022, 2023. Times have changed. And that easement, while I don't doubt it goes to the pond, it may not suffice, and it's up to us at this point, prior to moving further in this process, to have some other viable option if possible, or to know that this one is actually going to suffice. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other, Debbie, anything? Alan, any questions?
The phrasing of council, I agree with it, and I agree with to my best of my knowledge, and I haven't done it exhaustively, the town has experienced, not village, with things euphemistically known as agricultural easements. Counsel for the Fowler family have given lots of examples. They're in the file. I've read every one of them. I think the oldest was for Erdigan. I've read them all. And it's good practice. The planning people for the town, I've discussed it with them. Everybody knows how they work, and it's an issue. The village, there's an anomaly. The village's view of what's left of the space, not much is left in the village as it develops, is not the same as the town's legally or historically or otherwise. And so if we decide on behalf of a village to do just what the town does. That's a decision we'll make. But I don't believe that the larger goal, which is to facilitate the maximum desired, which I generally understand, outcome for the Fowler family of currently at least 3 generations, for the long run, as council says, heirs, successors, and assigns, will get in the way of working out these details. It may not be a cookie cutter version of the same town agricultural thing, and there are just a few small issues. And for the reservation of this approval to everything charge ahead, I'm sure that the Fowler family can work those out quickly.
And just
no delay. It's in their control. They have 2 other lots of real consequence contiguous, which are served by these buildings. That has to continue. Maybe the barns should be somewhere else, but they're here. Everything is preserved for as little change as they want. The town will cope with that. Maybe there'll be 2 agriculture. That's up to them. That's not our business. We ought to coordinate with it as much as we can, but it's up to the town, not the village. But this last gas of the agricultural gas for the village, all of this plan, which Ricky's, I think, the spokesman for his family, that they want to preserve it. It's got support on every level that I've detected in the village of Southampton of any responsible person. So I think if we can get this approval, subject to these details on the village version of what it'll be constructive.
And as just to follow up on what Mr. McFarland said, you're correct in that there are many ag easements have taken many different forms since I think the 80s they came about as a concept. But what we are looking at here is a document that can be tailor-made, it can be bespoke, and that at the preliminary plat stage, we can go through conditions that we want to see in that document, and we can negotiate that document at an appropriate time. So there's no, I guess if there's one thing I want to leave the board with, there's no danger that we are going to rubber stamp a cookie cutter document which will oblige us to how the town does it or how East Hampton does it or other jurisdictions. We will have a bespoke document here.
Any other comments, questions? Good.
Well, I just will say that Article 7-72A of the State Law and Village Subdivisions does say that this section of law does not distinguish between sketch plan, preliminary plan, or final plan, but we are tasked with helping the applicant with as much detail as possible so that they can come back with the sketch plan that actually notes these changes to the best of their ability. It's still broad strokes, but we need to know what the strokes are as soon as possible rather than later, because fine-tuning later is something that can be done, certainly, but you don't want to leave something off now at this state and make their work more difficult later. So I think we should deal with as much as we could now.
Okay. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to discuss. So, Debbie, you're good?
I think my only thing, and maybe it's been said already, is that I want to make sure that we address the buildings and what could be done or not done if the buildings get degraded. If the buildings need to be rebuilt or repurposed or restrict the ability to repurpose the buildings. I want to make sure that we're clear about that in the document, because that could be contentious. It would be nice to pin it down.
Amanda, anything else?
I just love to know more when you say that about the repurposing. What are your thoughts on that? If you care to expand, what your concerns are specifically, or what might be a concern.
It might be a concern to turn a barn into workforce housing, or it might be a concern to change a barn into a geodesic dome, or something along those lines, or make something taller, or.
So that is a good observation, and I go back to where I speak about a tailor-made bespoke document. And workforce housing, I know that has been a concern, and I think Sagaponack, some eastern parts of the town, but we could address that very easily within the covenants and restrictions or the ag easement, However, we choose to reduce these things into writing, we can just say, A, no agricultural housing, no labor housing, no workforce housing, period. That is something that we can address in a document.
Well, we might want to talk to the applicants about this prior to going down the road, because the agricultural reserves have been in many newspaper articles. There are loopholes for changes. There's litigation. There's people trying to work, workers changing all kinds of things, and we see that all the time. So we really do need to have a very tight covenant and restrictions on that to try and make sure that this doesn't get changed into something that we didn't anticipate. And that will take careful drafting by the applicant and by us, and a give and take. So the timing of this is important, but the commitment to farming and what happens when the farming ceases are major considerations for this board. And of course, they're the fundamentals on which we're granting the subdivision, and happy to do so. But the language, I don't think we should keep kicking the can down the road. We got to get serious about the language, and we've suggested revisions. We're yet to hear about them. So I don't know when that is that this board will get together with Mr. Bennett to talk about this.
Well, typically, and I'm Mrs. Eisman, you can follow up if you'd like. Ms. Eisman, I'm sorry. And I think either I or you mentioned it earlier. Yeah. It's very rare to have full drafted documents at the sketch plan stage. As I recall, and I don't have the file in front of me, I can't remember it, but with the Husky, I don't think that driveway easements were contemplated or driven up until the final plat stage. So the idea now, the purpose of the exercise is sketch plan is an agreement as to the form and the layout. And at preliminary, once we're doing SECRA, once we're having our second public hearing, then we can start discussing. We can draft, Mr. Bennett can draft and submit. We can work towards that language at that time. And what we can do to give the board a level of comfort between now and then is the sketch plan approval resolution could say, subject to an agreement being reached between the applicant and the planning board as to content of the buffer, the wetlands buffer, content of the agricultural reserve area easement.
Yeah,
that's correct. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So I don't want to beat this to death. So I think everybody understands. We understand the process. Look, we have a general outline of a sketch plan. I think in front of us. Clearly, there need to be some modifications to that. We've got a long way to go. A long way to go on the details and conditions of the specific wording of an ag reserve and a conservation easement. We've got,
Do you mean amendments to the sketch plan, or just drafting a resolution?
Drafting a resolution.
Understood. Just want to clarify.
So we've got a long way to go in this process to get to nail down all the details. And I don't want to start negotiating that at a sketch plan approval stage. I don't think that's appropriate, and it certainly isn't what's typically done. So I think we'll revisit those issues that you bring up at a later stage in the process when it's traditionally done, and nail down those details as we've been advised by our consultant and our legal advisor.
Excuse me, but Mark, I think that the sketch plan does get labeled at this point. I mean, it's natural for the sketch plan to have certain markings and references and changes that should appear on various sketch plans.
In my experience, sketch plans typically are not massively detailed.
Not massively, but if an easement needs to be drawn in that's not there, that's pretty important. If that drainage easement doesn't fit in, I'm not saying it doesn't, but if it doesn't and something needed to be changed on the plats in the dimension, whatever, that's not something you want to wait till you have a plat. You want the applicant not to have to go through that.
The way we can address that, and this is just arguendo, if the board is uncomfortable with the language of the 1969 easement being limited to drainage, we could put covenants in a draft resolution saying that the applicant has the opportunity to submit alternate means of access to the pond that they might find, and in the event that we can't come to an agreement on the sufficiency of that access, then we could do a limited 30-day upon written notice, municipal only environmental testing review easement. But we can do some sort of either or analysis there, so
Yeah,
that that's still on the radar when we get to preliminary plat stage, but it's addressed and it's acknowledged at the sketch plan stage.
Yeah, we've been, look, on the easement, this environmental access easement to the pond, we've been crystal clear on this point from the beginning. It's something we've got to solve. What's currently been submitted, I'm not sure solves that. But we got a lot of work to do to figure that out, and we're going to figure that out. Okay, but I don't want that to hold up a sketch plan at this point. With that being said, I am going to ask Rick, John, if you have any comments that you'd like to make. Please keep it to 3 minutes, because
We can give him some time.
Yeah.
Give it 3 minutes.
Is really dissolve and hopefully disappear what has been a very, very frustrating issue for me. Maybe I suffer from having been involved in this stuff for 40 years, so there are certain things that are just so black and white. I just want to talk to you about this ag parcel. It'll be a cold day in hell before anything happens on there other than agriculture. It's just not possible. Let's talk about workforce housing, for example. Let's talk about agricultural housing, because I think one of the things that people are thinking about is this thing that happened in Bridgehampton on that parcel off of Butter Lane. The town of Southampton has a section in its zoning code that states that agricultural housing is an accessory use for agriculture. It's residential, but it's a type of residential housing that isn't viewed as residential. Sounds like an oxymoron, but it's right in the code. This is the town code, and it says you can have agricultural labor as an agricultural use on an ag parcel or on a farm parcel. It's a specific accessory use, and there's been zoning board of appeals cases on it, all sorts of stuff. As a matter of fact, there was a litigation over it, and there was just a settlement where they allowed the agricultural. So, what do you have in the village? The village of Southampton does not have that. As a matter of fact, it says right in the code, it says agricultural labor as an accessory use to agriculture, not permitted. So town, you're talking about town, talking about village, black and white. So this specter of fear of something that's going to happen there comes out of, I don't want to say it is just misinformation is what it is, number one. Let me tell you, I'll be going to be very direct about this specific property. There is an agricultural labor housing on this ag reserve area, and it was the subject of a 1990 variance granted by the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Village of Southampton, and it was subject to very, very specific conditions. And I think that's important that everybody knows this, because I feel like I'm trying to prove a negative when people are concerned about what's going to happen on that parcel. The cottage shall be deemed to be accessory to the farm use, and if the subject property is subdivided, it shall not exist on any other lot with any other dwelling. So what they're saying is I can't put this, which is not, with this plan is not an issue at all, because this is just going to be the ag reserve. I couldn't have put a lot over here and have this as an accessory guest quarters for a main house, because it has to be, then it wouldn't be agricultural. The cottage shall not be rented, but shall be provided as living space to persons employed in agricultural work. The cottage shall not be considered accessory to the residential use of the property, and at such time as the ag use of the property is discontinued, the use of the building for living purposes shall be discontinued. This work was all done for you 32 years ago by the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that's the only agricultural labor building there. Number one, your zoning code disallows any further agricultural labor on the property. Workforce housing, by its terms, people like to say workforce housing, but guess what? It's housing. That would be a residential use on this property, which would be disallowed. You cannot have it. The health department approval for this doesn't allow any residential uses other than these. Amanda, if you're concerned about the planning board not having a say
on any change. I mean, I literally put such strong language in that agricultural covenant that I don't even begin to see how anyone could meet that standard. But if you're concerned about the planning board not having a say, and I get that, so it'll have to be a majority of +1 of the trustees, and the mayor and the trustees, a mandatory referendum, and a majority +1 of the planning board. I don't care. Whatever. I'm so not concerned about this ever being anything other than agriculture. Put whatever belt and suspenders you want in there. The reason it runs to the town is that, to the trustees, is that ag reserves, by their nature and pursuant to 247 of the General Municipal Law, they run to the municipality. You're like a subset of the municipality, but they have to run to the village trustees and the mayor. So there's no attempt to do the planning board out of it, but if you want to put in, we can add to the easement that not only do the trustees have to approve it, a mandatory referendum, but also the planning board. I have no problem with that, because I don't, it's being a cold day in hell when someone's even going to have the nerve to ask to change it.
Well,
So
what about the judicial system, if I may? So are we allowed, where can we move it into that realm?
Tell me because I lost you on that. I'm very interested. I want to give you whatever comfort you want on it. No, seriously.
Well, thank you. First of all, I would like to see those documents. We don't have the documents that
It was
provide the
submitted to you.
zoning.
Which
the,
documents?
It's the ag
I've
reserve
not
that
seen
has the majority
Okay.
+1 in the easement.
No,
We do
I'm
have
talking about the zoning of the housing on this property
Did
and
you
all
submit that
the.
with the?
Yeah, so I'll send you.
We need to
the
see
you can
that.
email
We
it
need,
to me
we need
again.
to
Yeah,
see
I'll
that.
It should be in the Dropbox, but.
Well,
I'll
that's
get it
significant.
to you.
I've not seen it.
Okay,
I'm
I'll
not
get it
aware
to
of
you.
it, and I'd like to see it.
Sure. I think
But
you'll be very
generally,
comforted by it.
I think that
But the
my
judicial
fear
one-
of taking things into the political, having the trustees vote, having the referendum is different than normally things like this, in my understanding, go to judges. If you want to reverse an ag reserve, if you've got issues with, that's why it ends up in litigation.
No, what you would have to do is you would have to, no, that's not true. Whoever told you that is misinformed. You have to have, by law, you have to have something in the document that allows you to change it, even if that's never going to be used. So what I did was I put in there the trustees, a majority +1 of the trustees, number one. And then I also put in there something that's not in the village code, not in the 247 of the General Municipal Law. I put in there a mandatory referendum by 2/3 of the voters. Unfortunately, I don't know when the last anybody ever got 2/3 of a vote on a referendum. But I put that in there for a reason. And then we can graft in there that you guys have a vote on it too. I don't care, but you lost me on the judicial thing. I'm not trying to be
I'll
dumb
get
like
back
a
to you
fox.
on
I'm
that.
trying to
No, we can have
understand.
a discussion about that, but I'm a little confused about why you say that there has to be a clause. Obviously, I understand a clause of what happens when farming ends.
Right.
That's an important question. But that can be simply solved with, at that point, the land can be privately held, owned, someone can buy it, but it can be open, natural, without being changed, the use changing.
The common language is, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I've heard in the past and in a variety of different places is mowed twice a year to keep down successional growth.
Yeah, but we're not going to do that. We're going to keep farming it.
But 100 years from now or whenever, I mean, the important thing.
Excuse me? Let's just talk about the ag reserve. Yeah.
I'm just looking for my notes on. There's so much of it in the news, and there was one recently.
So
I
much
think
of it
it's
in the what?
topping farm.
In the news?
No, I'm just talking about the idea of ag reserves and them getting changed, their uses changing. It's really important. So that's all we're trying to do. We've got to come together on it.
Amanda, you have to help me because I don't know what properties you're talking about. And as Alan said, and as I've just told you, the town and the village are very, very different. The village trustees have said, we don't want agricultural labor as an accessory use of agriculture. So the code doesn't allow it. And then I've said we have this ZBA decision that deals with the only agricultural building, ag labor building on there. And I've given you what I can only think of as a airtight ag reserve. It's the tightest one I've ever drafted for anybody.
I understand
And
what you're
we'll
saying
add to that
regarding the
planning
housing.
board,
But after
the
cessation
judicial-
of farming,
I don't.
what is the language that you would like to see after cessation of farming when we're requiring it to stay open, natural, in private hands?
That's different. You're thinking of an open space parcel. An ag reserve parcel it has open space qualities, but it's not an open space parcel. It, by its very nature, it has a use other than what's the word I'm looking for? Not an active.
Fallow.
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 Well, it would still remain private. There would be no ownership by
Correct.
anyone of
We
the
can't
village.
demand-
I understand that, but we're just saying that it wouldn't convert to something else that would be.
As a farm, as an agricultural reserve. It
Yes.
can't not be farmed.
Yeah.
It can't. I'm really,
In perpetuity.
It
If
has
you
to
are,
be
if you
in
decide you want to sell it, you no longer want,
It has
it could,
to remain as a farm.
yes.
well,
You can-
that language, it'd be interesting to see your language on it because I think that's
It's
been
right.
a contention.
It says it runs with the land. It says it runs with the land, which means that anybody who wants to buy this is stuck with an agricultural use.
But
That's
then
all
you
there is
have a
to it.
loophole saying
What's the
it goes to a
loophole?
referendum, this, that, and the other. What are they deciding? If it can be changed, if our covenants can be changed,
let me tell you something.
right?
You want a mechanism there because you want a tough mechanism there that makes it, in effect, impossible. Because if you say nothing in it, that's when you get some. That's when you're going to
Well,
get.
on that we're
No.
agreed.
When you say nothing in
Uh-huh.
there, that's when you're going to get someone to go to a judge and ask him to change it. He's going to say, "Well, the circumstances have changed and all that stuff." You want that mechanism there so that somebody can't just go directly to seek some sort of judicial aid. The municipality has to say, wait a minute, you can't just go into a judge and ask him to change that. You've got to come to us. You've got to get a majority of one. You've got to get a mandatory referendum. And you know something? That was a negotiated thing. You bought the property with that covenant. You looked at it. You had notice of it. Don't complain to me about that.
Well, that's what
Thanks.
the judge would say as well. That
Excuse
would be,
me?
it would be protected within the judicial arena as well because you have several layers of protection. So we want the same
I
thing. We
don't
just
know.
want the
I
best
have
way to do it.
I don't understand what you're talking about.
Okay.
If I may,
Yeah, John, go ahead, please.
and stop me
John,
if
go
I'm misrepresenting anything. But my understanding is if we, and again, it's going to be a tailor-made, bespoke document coming down the road at the preliminary plat stage. The only way, if you have an easement under Environmental Conservation Law 49-305, which is, from my understanding, the common mechanism by which ag easements have been preserved. You need to show that there's no actual and substantial benefit for the easement anymore in order for it to be unwound. So I just find it would stymie me how anyone could go and say, no, this ag easement, which the planning board agonized about back in 2024 and put into place and had covenants and restrictions, and the comp plan at the time, was talking about agricultural preservation. It would just be such a hard task for someone to argue that it's of no benefit anymore.
Well, as Debbie mentioned, we read about it every day, that people are
But those are,
arguing.
again,
Tell me
and
what
they-
this is, though.
We want to
these
protect
are-
the farm.
well,
We
I
want to
think
protect
we're
the farmland. That's it.
comparing apples and
Look,
oranges here
Yeah.
with these documents.
We don't want to start negotiating this ag reserve. I don't want to cut the
Well, it's
discussion off. But
important.
I was just trying to give comfort. That's all.
Yes,
That's
yes.
all I was
I
trying to
appreciate that.
you've-
I do.
we appreciate that. Move on.
But if this isn't the venue to ask questions, where do we
It
ask
is the
them?
venue to ask questions, but it's not the venue to start negotiating what the
We're not
form and
negotiating.
substance, it certainly sounds that way to me.
Well, just to back it up,
But
I think that
hang on. I'd like to put this aside.
Okay,
We'll revisit
okay.
this at the appropriate time,
Thank
which
you.
is not sketch plan. Do
I
you have
agree.
any other comments, reactions to the outline
think
that we
Debbie-
gave at the beginning of the meeting?
I have a question or clarification, and that is, can we talk about what it means to have a fallow? Is there a definition? I mean, he's saying agricultural easement, and so if you stop actively growing things and it's still an agricultural easement,
Yes.
then what does that look like, and what are the restrictions on?
There are many agricultural properties in the town of Southampton where, for economic reasons, for certain time periods, they're not farmed, and essentially you have to either plant it with a cover crop or just let it go fallow.
And I believe Village Code asks you to cut it twice a year too, right? You just can't let it grow out of control. So there are code
No, you
restrictions
can't,
on
no.
how that has to be maintained. It's not a high bar, but it just can't go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not actively farming it, sometimes just by the nature of the farming, it rests. But having said all of that, there was a ag reserve off of Butter that was fallow for 15 years, but no one could do anything with it. You couldn't do anything with it.
So you see no impediment to the land becoming a permanent open fallow agricultural space in perpetuity?
Oh, I see a huge impediment to that because it has buildings on it now, and the difference between open space parcels and ag reserve parcels is that you allow for buildings. Let's be really clear about that.
Let's say the buildings were in disarray at that point and they were not going to be refurbished. The land would still be an agricultural reserve, fallow in perpetuity, in the middle of this beautiful subdivision, and it would be an historic reference to what the village was.
The village code says that you can't let buildings go into disrepair.
So then what would be your acceptable use of those buildings or acceptable repair of those buildings at the time when the ground were fallow because no one was farming? How do you envision those buildings would become refurbished, and to what purpose?
Well, let's talk about the repurposing of them. They could only be repurposed for something that would be used in conjunction with Section 301 of the Ag and Markets Law. That's what I put in the easement. So 301 of the Ag and Markets Law only allows agriculture. I mean, I feel a little bit like I'm giving you all of these reasons why ain't nothing going to happen there but agriculture in perpetuity.
John, any other comments specific to the outline that we gave at the opening of the meeting?
Well, I don't, I mean, I think I would just say that, the terms of these, I would like to see if you could vote on this map as it is. You're still, sketch plan approval, you have a 3-stage process now. You have sketch plan approval, then I have to file a preliminary application, which believe me, stuff is going to be talked about there.
Understood.
Then I have to, after I get preliminary approval, I have to file a final application. You're probably going to have a hearing on at least the preliminary. If I know this board, probably the final. There'll be a lot of stuff to be talked about. But this application for a sketch plan was filed in October of 22. Let's just get it approved like that, and we'll talk about other things.
Understood, John.
I'm not running away from any of those things.
Yeah, no, understood. We wanted to make sure that we had all the high-level points out on the table, because we don't like surprises, and you don't like surprises, right? So, that being said, I'd like to make...
The only thing I will add, I'm sorry, is I'd like to leave the language about that, where the access is going to happen, for discussion. Ultimately, we're going to have to deal with it, but...
John, you mean truck access, or?
The turn is very difficult, particularly since there's parking here. There might be some in the middle of things that we could come to. There's also, that's not a heck of a lot of site distance for down here. So I'm not trying to run away from that, but I'd like to be able to talk another day about it. That's all.
Totally understood. And look, on that one, I think what's driving this conversation, or this issue, is sprucing up that entire area along there. Now, to have 18-wheel trucks coming in and out of that curve, a 90-degree curve, isn't the safest thing. If there's an alternative to addressing the sprucing up concern and also the safety concern, we're
that's all I need
happy
to
talk about it. That's all I need. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the sketch plan. Can you give me a hand on the specific wording of what that motion would be?
So what we could do is, I mean, we've already done it, but we could renew the motion to have me draft a resolution for whatever our next meeting may be. But you can make a vote now. You can make a vote now. And it'll be pending the written resolution.
And that resolution would be effectively the points that I outlined at the beginning of the meeting as a general approach to the sketch plan. And the conditions. What do you mean specifically? Yes. Yeah, there were some conditions that we outlined.
Brief notice of certain conditions.
Second?
I'll second it.
Yeah. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Can I vote and then I make a statement if I'd like? Because I want to explain.
Well, if there's a motion,
there's a motion that
So-
we're calling a vote on, and I'll have you explain afterwards, okay?
Okay.
So I'm not gonna cut, we're not trying to cut anyone
Okay.
off. So all in favor of this motion, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
So motion passes.
Yeah, I would
Would
just
you like
like
to
to say that I'm passing, I'm denying, and for the reason that I feel that, in my view, we have too many issues to resolve at this point to do anything but disprove. Modification, which is the other option, assumes that there are agreements to modify, and we haven't reached all the agreements that I feel we need to. I have no doubt we'll get there, but the easement, some of these other things, I would have preferred John Borkman to write a draft resolution. I would have appreciated if it had been more conditional, because the sketch plan fails to contain many of the elements that could form the basis of this approval. As I said, a historic part of Southampton farming, and all the features and all the requirements that the board wants have to be reflected on the sketch plan or be referenced, the CNRs, which we haven't even started really getting through with our attorney. So based on those reasons and village codes 97-2, 97-7, 9710G, 9735A, state law 7725, which, and section 9739, village code 97.8E, all of these direct us to
Can you
make
explain
specific
what in those
recommendations.
sections we're not complying with here?
It's the
Yeah,
specific
I-
recommendations, that's it. It's just specific recommendations to be incorporated by the applicant in the next submission on the sketch plan. I'd feel better if all of us had a better understanding of what that sketch plan would approve. And I'm a little concerned about the easement, because that may, if we find out it's not, the drainage easement is not sufficient, and it may very well be, but if we do find that we still need a means of access, I'd like to see it on the plan. I'd like to understand it, and then I'd like to be able to move quickly and thoroughly through the other stages in agreement. So I think at this point it's premature, but that's just my view.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Just a
Thank you.
housekeeping, but we
Hang
should
on,
probably, well,
Yeah,
you
before-
might want this.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Do we want to renew a motion or have a new motion for me to draft a resolution? Because I know we had one a ways back that lingered.
We just did.
That was included in the language? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
we're just doing the motion to approve the sketch plan as outlined at the beginning of the meeting in my overview. So motion passes. You're going to draft a resolution, and our next meeting, we sign, right? Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Motion to adjourn. I don't think there's anything else. A motion to adjourn? Okay.
Everything's to the next day.
Yeah, everything's next.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Adjourn?
All right,
Thank
meeting
you.
adjourned. Thank you very
Thank you.
much, everyone.
I'll get